Benny Rubin, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much, Mateo. A pleasure to be here. I almost said it's always a pleasure to be here, but this is my first time, so I can't say that yet. You have to invite me back, and then I can say it's always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. And honestly, reading your background has been so interesting. I have so many questions, but for our listeners, Benny is a 3-time entrepreneur with 1 sale, 1 failure, and is now currently working on Senders.co, of which he's the CEO and founder. And you have a really interesting backstory, and I would love to get into the email deliverability, domain reputation, all that, because I know my listeners, they have a ton of questions. I asked them on my Instagram stories. We have questions for you. But before we get into that, you have a really interesting backstory. Can you take us back through your journey? Because you have a background in music and all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah, happy to. So I grew up in Southern California in the 80s and 90s. So that already means that I'm a millennial, and that anytime you're talking to people that are a little bit older, there's always lots of stories, But I went to music school. I went to the Berklee College of Music. I studied violin, viola, electric bass, super into music. I sort of realized at that point that I wasn't going to be a musician. There's something about understanding your true strengths and weaknesses, and understanding that you don't have this sort of intense passion to overcome the weaknesses, that I realized pretty early on in my music school journey. I've made a lot of records. I love music. I still play a lot of music, but there's a very big difference, probably a gulf of 10 to 35,000 hours between me and someone who is truly excelling at something. At music school, I got really interested in Japan, both the language and sort of Japan as a concept. I visited when I was maybe 18, 19, and I said, wow, this place is amazing. I really want to live here. So I shifted my focus in music school. I was still practicing and doing all the stuff you have to do to like keep up. But I was interested in Japan and Japanese language, and I got interested in business, kind of like, where's the intersection of these things? So I studied a lot about music business and how that was coming together. Quite a different landscape then as it is now. Now it's all streaming. Then there were no streaming platforms. I mean, you can't say that there's a lot of parallels.
Right.
Was I moved to Japan. I did some stuff in between. I moved to Japan. I went to school for Japan the year. I studied Japanese really hard. I became able to speak, read, and write in Japanese. And then all my buddies had finished music school at that point, and one of them pulled me back to the States and said, hey, do you want to play bass for this Sony artist? We're going to go out on tour. And he knew I knew how to play, of course. So I flew back, joined this band, and I really only lasted 6 months or so as a bass player because something interesting was happening. What was happening was social media was becoming a thing. So it's really, really hard for Gen Z to understand that there was a world before social media. In high school, we had MySpace, we had silly things, but really a very, very different world. And the thought experiment of a world without social media is not hard for millennials to imagine, but it's really, really kind of challenging for younger folks to wrap their head around. Before social media, there was always many, many layers between an artist and their fans. Mm-hmm. Just think about that for a while. If a superstar, Enrique Iglesias or something, would never speak directly with fans at all. It was always through some sort of media that was changing his message in some way, or management layers that were getting in the way in some way. But around 2008, 2009, that was all getting disintermediated. Suddenly, artists could communicate directly with fans in a way that wasn't through like a fan club or like some sort of email newsletter. It was like very direct. That was the rise of Twitter, the rise of Facebook, the rise of all these platforms that were really making that possible. And I was really interested in Japan. I was really interested in the artist to fan relationship. And I thought it'd be really cool to start a company that helped Western artists connect directly with their Japanese fans through things like Twitter and Facebook. So I moved back to Japan, and I instantly accidentally became a B2B salesperson, because in order for me to get these deals done where I would handle the social media for Western artists in Japan, I needed to talk to record labels, management companies, So I was 23, 24 at the time, and I had to become a B2B marketer. I had to be like, okay, how am I going to get the meeting with Warner, Universal, Sony? Okay, what am I going to do in that meeting? How am I going to price this? What's comfortable for them? What's not comfortable for them? What's the statement of work going to look like? What's the terms going to be? How much legal stuff am I going to put in the contract? Are we going to take their lead, or am I going to take the lead? Am I going to teach them how to buy from me, or are they going to teach them how to sell, how I can sell to them? These are all the things that you have to figure out when you're going to do a B2B business. Most people were like me. They don't think about these things in advance. They have to think of them on the fly. You learn later that messing up these things actually ruins deals, even if people think you're competent to do it. You come in and they say, great, we're ready to get started. And you say, great, I'll start tomorrow. And they say, well, there's no statement of work, there's no agreement, there's no contract. You go, oh gosh, golly, I didn't even think of that. You sort of end up, someone says, well, Matteo, I know you're super competent with all these automations, and you Zapier inside and out, and you could build these things in a day. But if you can get a contract together, if you can't get a statement of work together, if your terms are weird, you know what I mean? So I learned how to become a B2B person quite quickly, and I had to rely a lot on my customers to help guide me through that process, because I was just a kid and I didn't really know that much. And again, the internet was pretty new, so there wasn't a lot of information. You couldn't just go on YouTube. YouTube existed, but you couldn't go on YouTube and find 1,000 people telling you, here are download my toolkit for, all the stuff that you're doing. There really was not a lot of it. So I started this company that managed social media for major celebrities, in partnership with their labels in Japan. Justin Bieber, Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, Beyonce. And a lot of the pages that we set up and managed are still functional today. They've changed forms, they changed shapes, but a lot of them have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of followers. They still run. What happened was we built this. Music industry was interesting and fun, and I learned a lot. We transitioned to doing it for ad agencies, totally different sale. So we learned about how to do channel partnership type sales, where you go to an agency and then you try to convince the agency to sell what you're doing onto a client, and all that, the feeling of being in the middle and understanding the dynamic that comes with ad agencies that are serving big brands. And then at a certain point, we said, hey, let's build software. It'll be more fun. And we sold the business to one of our partners, not partners in that sense, one of our the agencies that worked with us, so agencies that we were partnering with on sales. And I moved back to the States. I started a company that was relatively early in social media management on the influencer side, 2014, 2015. We were not the right people for the job. There was not a good founder product fit. We shut it down. But through the process, I made a lot of friends who were running and starting companies. We did a really great accelerator, just really widened our network. And through that whole time, I had gotten really good at cold emailing. And so when I turned my attention to all my founder friends, and just said, hey, what do you need from me? They said, well, you're good at cold email. We need help with that. So I started a cold email outbound agency in 2016, which in the grand scheme of cold email is very early. There were maybe like 4 or 5 agencies that were doing it already at the time, but definitely not 400 or 500 like there are now.
Yeah.
And then from 2016 to 2020, we focused really heavily on clients. We grew really rapidly from 2020 to 2021, probably $20,000 a month in revenue to $200,000 a month in revenue, that kind of growth. And then right around that time, we also decided to shift our focus to email deliverability only. And there's a lot of ins and outs as to why, but email deliverability became a real focus. And then now we serve maybe around 80 concurrent B2B clients, and probably 60 of them rely on us primarily, if not only, for the mechanics of sending. IP addresses, domain health, domain management, best practices around that, and they pay us a monthly fee for us to manage their sending mechanisms. And then 20 or so clients at the moment, at least, it changes and ebbs and flows, but 20 or so now are a little bit more full service, where we're providing copywriting and day-to-day account management of their email outbound.
What a ride.
Yeah.
What a ride. Yeah.
Couple continents, bunch of industries. Yeah, it's been fun.
That's
I mean,
the way
there's a
to
lot
do
of
it.
stuff happen. You know, life happens in between all those things too, of
Right.
course, right? Like we're telling the business side. But was it painful to shut down my business in 2015? Yes. Was it? Yeah. Was that? Did I feel a lot of? Was it a huge bummer? Yes. Did I decide that I didn't really want to do venture capital path, at least for a long time? Yes. Did I bootstrap this current business? Yes. Are there any outside investors? No. So it really is um, a different kind of business, which might, for a lot of your listeners, might actually be more interesting and attractive than the alternatives.
Yeah, yeah. I have one of my friends. He's in the backlog for one of these future episodes, and he's VC funded, and that's getting that perspective is a completely different animal. I would love to just go back to what you said earlier about
Sure.
the music industry, especially
Sure.
in its infancy when it was shifting to what I and my friends call a subscription type influencer
Sure.
model.
Yeah.
Because something really interesting is happening. One of my friends, she was telling me, you need to check out what happened with Jennifer Lopez and her
Sure.
documentary, and how she fell out of touch because a lot of people can just smell that inauthenticity. Whereas when you're seeing and have exposure to a influencer, like a modern day influencer, modern day musician, you get that day-to-day one-to-one direct
Sure.
exposure. And like you said, there's no buffer between these layers of whether it be newsletters or anything else, which is really interesting.
I think that the internet has this weird habit of dehumanizing people. And I think that a lot of the dehumanization is exacerbated or like made worse by the way that people use these platforms. And I'll give you an example. I'm a believer, and I've written about this on my LinkedIn if you're interested in my philosophy on this. I always believe that there's two internets. There's the ClickFunnels internet and there's the HubSpot internet.
Mm,
And in some ways, and this isn't a knock on ClickFunnels per se, but ClickFunnels has a lot of features in it that are designed to like squeeze people into places, like a squeeze page, for example.
yeah.
There's nothing more inauthentic in my view than a squeeze page. Where you start at the top and it rattles on and on and on and on and has all these testimonials that may or may not be fake, little grainy videos that are trying to manipulate you into doing the next step. And the next step, lo and behold, is never really usually as easy as you think the next step's going to be. It's trying to get you to the webinar, and the webinar is in a video format that you can't pause, and like all this kind of silliness. I know a lot of it's changing and whatever, and not everyone uses ClickFunnels for this purpose. That is so different from the HubSpot internet. The HubSpot internet, all the buttons are round, no call to action buttons wiggle, almost everything ends in a 9 or a 0.
Yeah.
You buy something, it goes straight to like a Stripe style checkout page. You buy it. There's no money back guarantee. There's no little seals on the bottom showing the authenticity. You're like there's just none of that stuff in the HubSpot internet. And I think in the past, a lot of artist to fan relationships were kind of like a ClickFunnels internet type thing, where you would buy tickets to the concert and maybe there'd be a meet and greet and then there'd be a huge barrier and then you'd walk in and then the artist would maybe do one dispatch a month, or they do one album cycle a year, and then they would go on tour, and then they could basically say the same exact thing from stage every single night because no one had cameras and whatever, they couldn't film it. There's no transfer of knowledge in that way. And now I think it's a lot more direct, there's less room for fluff. You need to have fewer layers. You need to be a little bit, artists seem to need to be a little bit closer to the authentic selves.
Yeah.
Even in their artist personality, of course, they're not going to be fully authentic because it's always going to get distorted through media lenses and whatever. But I think that there's something to that kind of thing. And if you think about the artists that were coming up at the time when this big shift was happening, and keep in mind, guys, I'm not a music industry guy now, so this is all really just in retrospect, and me thinking about this because you asked. However, at the time, the artists that were really doing well very suddenly at that moment, artists like Katy Perry. Well, Katy Perry her management had like a special social network thing set up. She was active on MySpace. She was getting really active at direct to fan communication, even though there was very, very primitive at the time. artists like Justin Bieber famously got famous through YouTube. You could say that's pioneering. I mean, in a certain sense, it kind of is, right? To be like YouTube direct to fans. Fans developed a relationship with Justin before that became very, very common to do. So I think there's something to be said about legacy artists that made the jump. And I think now at this stage, you can't really be an artist that doesn't have all these things. But at the time, it was pretty novel. And when I went to the record labels to talk about it, I was the only person that had come to them and said, "Can I run Justin Bieber's page in Japanese for you?" And they said, "Wow, I never even thought of that." Sure. Which again, for those listening, the chances that you're going to be launching or you are launching something that is entirely novel, I would venture is pretty close to zero. There's just a lot of people doing a lot of things now. And there are fewer greenfield places. And even if you think you're totally unique, in the position we have at Senders, my company, at times we talk to 10 entrepreneurs a week. At times we talk to 50 entrepreneurs a week. They come in for sales calls. You know, they're doing cold emailing. They think they might need some help. We talk with them. There have been times when I have done sales and I've had 3 entrepreneurs in the same day pitch me the identical thing. And when I ask them, "Do you have a lot of competitors?" They go, "No, we don't have any competitors." But it's been in the same day.
Yeah.
Or what's unique about us is A, and that's the same thing that the other 2 companies said, what's unique about us is A. So that means that when you're cold emailing or reaching out to people or doing the work of trying to build your book of business, you have to be hyper aware that they not only have to decide that they want the expert that you are, but they have to decide that they want to work with you and not stop at the 15th burger joint on the way to the burger joint. Right?
Yeah.
Like you understand what I mean, right? It's like the distance they go.
You need to be a differentiator. Absolutely.
Yeah. If you think about it like in terms of like dry cleaning or, you know, dry cleaning services or something, you got to really believe that the dry cleaner that's half a mile away is better than the 3 that are within walking distance, or you're not going to make the trek. So we all end up in this position where we are in conversations and we are trying to get people to trust us and purchase things from us, but everything on the internet is one click away. So there has to be a sort of process that you do in order to get people to be interested in doing it with you rather than somewhere else.
Yeah, and that brings me to your business model, the emails. It seems like email has stood the test of time. I had one friend of mine call it the great equalizer, where like if it sits in your inbox, it could be sandwiched between Tony Robbins or Dean Graziosi's, but it's right there at the same time. And if you can protect your reputation, it's a powerful tool. So could you go into maybe what makes cold email the biggest open secret in business development?
Sure. It used to be, well, I think analogies are kind of fun because it's nice to tell a story. If there was one conference for your industry, like let's say there was what city do you live in now, Mateo?
Between Madrid and Washington, D.C. I'm D.C. right now.
Oh, DC now. Okay, cool. If there was a meetup called Business Automation and business owners were the only ones allowed in, people who are seeking automation and trying to do it on their own, and you were the only service provider that was allowed in the room. So there's 200 business owners that are trying to automate more, and there's you. And you have enough time. The real question is, what are you going to be saying to each of these people as you extend your hand to talk with them? Right? Like, hey, I'm Mateo. I do this and this and this way, and I help businesses that are like A and B to do this. And people choose me because I have da 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 da. And then you might ask a question like, what kind of business do you do? Oh, you're an auto body shop. Cool. Yeah, I've done work with auto body shops in this and that way. And sure, there's lots of room for automation and all sorts of processes. And I'd love the chance to connect with you. That is essentially how cold email functions when you are reaching out to your target market and you have a pretty good pitch. You're not going to build a lot of intrigue. You can't be mysterious because they have to know quite a lot about you to decide that there's something that interests them. You don't need to guess a lot about them, really, because they know everything there is to know about them. But people look at email. They open email. That's just what business people do. So it's not really magical that cold email continues to work as long as you're getting to the inbox. Can you play games with cold email? Can you expect to have single-digit interested reply rates? No, because that's dependent on what you say and your target market. But open secret, yeah, it's an open secret, just like buy a ticket to the biggest conference you can and go booth to booth and introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Is that a secret? Like, no, that's pretty standard. I think things get a little bit silly when folks are going after target markets that they really know nothing about, or they're going for crazy high volume games without a proper kind of offer that makes sense at high volume. But sending email is very, very inexpensive, and archiving an email is very, very inexpensive. So it can sort of always make economic sense to have cold email going if it's serving your business purposes.
And if it's not an open secret, what are some of the common mistakes most companies make when it comes to cold email, and why do they keep coming up?
Cold emails shifted over time. In 2016, when we started, it was actually relatively novel to send a cold email. So someone was receiving maybe a cold email a day, maybe at the most. And so if you had something unique enough to offer, you could generate a lot of meetings very easily. People would say, oh, that sounds interesting. Sure, I'd love to set up a time to chat. And you could just schedule meetings very easily. There are still clients of ours that have that effect, for sure. I think what's shifted over time is that you're not going to be very novel. You're not going to be very unique in their inbox. So you have to try a little bit harder to make sure that you're actually doing the work of attempting to differentiate yourself when you're explaining your services in the email. And there are many ways to do that, but it requires a high level of empathy. Meaning, the mistakes that people make is they're not thinking through the headspace of the person that they're emailing. And the second mistake people make is they're making too many assumptions about the person that they're emailing. An example would be for your business, if you were cold emailing and you cold emailed people and you said, hey, I'm sure you're struggling with all sorts of automation and you probably don't have very much automation in your business. They might be thinking, no, we invested super heavily in a very complex Zapier system, but it failed miserably. And if they told you that, you'd say, I'm really good at simplifying messed up Zapiers to make it really useful for you. That's a project I've done many times. Then they're like, that's interesting to me. But you're never going to cold email everyone and say, hey, do you have a messed up Zapier scenario where like you're trying to do things and it's not working well? You're never going to do that. So what you're doing is making assumptions. So what you have to do is think through the mental headspace of the person who's receiving this email. Understand that you might be competing with other people that are offering very similar things in the inbox at a very similar time. And then craft an email that both tells the story, positions you well, and also is a defense against their first line of objections.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to work all that into this little tiny slice of creative writing. It can be short. It can be long too. There's really nothing wrong with doing a longer email if you need more time to explain things. But that is usually the mistake they make. So one is you're not thinking clearly enough through the person who's receiving this and what you want them to get from the email and how you want them to act. And if you are thinking through it, you're baking too many assumptions into the email, and that could create problems with making it easy for someone to reply.
Yeah, no, I've definitely been guilty of that. And it's curious to hear that you are also open to the longer form cold email, because
Well, longer form, we're not talking about squeeze page length. We're talking about
Yeah.
more technical products that require more explanation. Sometimes you have to take the time to explain it because the explanation is where the differentiation becomes clear.
Yeah.
And if you don't do the explanation, you sound undifferentiated. It would be like if I said, like, hi Matteo, do you need a dry cleaning service? Benny, you might be like, well, I already have a dry cleaner. It's fine. When my wool sweater gets dirty or whatever, I take it to the dry cleaner. So it's easy to say no. If you get an email that says, hi Matteo, do you have a dry cleaner that you really rely on? Even if it's not close to you, you should rely on us. Here's why. The here's why can be pretty long. But at least what by the end of it, you're like, okay, now I understand why I would choose this dry cleaner over the one that's right next to my house.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, you got to definitely do your due diligence and show that you care a little bit. I have one of my friends who he's he's a good person, but he's been doing some black hat type things with his emails. For instance, in the subject line, he puts forward, right? And
Sure,
there's
but that's not even clever.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
No, it's not even in that sense. All of the cleverness that anyone can come up with are basically in line with the cleverness that people try to do in YouTube to skirt some sort of rule. It's Google. It's you versus Google. Google will win,
Okay.
right? Putting forward at the front of an email is deceptive. Deceptive business practices are not allowed by Google. Google punishes people for doing deceptive business practices. It's sort of like all the cleverness that people can come up with. The internet has already stamped these things out, and you might be able to get 10 emails a day or 20 emails a day out. But if you're trying to do emails at a scale and volume that really is meaningful for your business, whether it's 100 a day or most of our clients send between 400 and 4,000 emails a day, all that like silliness, like, oh, I have 20 Google Workspace accounts and they're all sending only 20 emails a day, and or like all this kind of silliness ends up backfiring in some meaningful way. So the clients that hire us are ones that have decided that cold emails is very important to their growth, and they would prefer to have the IP addresses, the domains, the DNS records, and some aspects of their methodology handled by us, because we sent 30 million cold emails in the last 12 months. So for us, it's not a game. It's a very serious practice. And the moment at which a client of ours feels like we're not giving them what they need, they can unceremoniously fire us. So there might be little tips and tricks and hacks that people are sharing online about, ooh, this subject line is working well, like that subject line is working well. Okay, sure. That's all fine. Getting into deceptive things, probably not very smart to do. You're literally trying to outfox systems that have built up a tremendous amount of defenses against this.
No, I agree. That's why I'm sending him this episode when it's over. So,
well, that
what
may
if
be
you,
the least worrisome thing that person's doing. They might be doing a lot
absolutely.
more worrisome things. You never know.
Yeah, no, I'm biting my tongue, but just for other people who, for some reason or another, like you knew exactly what I was talking about, for instance. So it is somewhat of like a common practice some people do. Like you said, there's no long-term vision for it. What are some other tactics like that you've seen that are a bit disappointing because you know that it's not going to work long-term, but they keep coming up?
Well, okay, so there's a couple of interesting things at play. One is that, like almost everything with the internet right now, it was all invented by millennials.
Interesting.
Basically, right? Like
Yep.
Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, all these things are millennial run businesses. That isn't to say that millennials a specific age range or something, but we're talking about people that saw the world before these things, they built them, and then now they exist. The second thing that should be understood is that almost all, if not 80%, of all the budget for spending on anything and everything in the US is managed and controlled by millennials, Gen X, and boomers.
Mm-hmm.
That also means that almost all the tactics at play were invented and refined by millennials. So there's at least 10 to 15 years of cold emailing that's existed. And cold email has been around since email started. Really, you can Google it. There was the first cold email sent probably in the 1970s, selling mainframe computers or something.
Yeah.
Almost all the old tactics that come back, the people who receive them, the millennials, go, oh, I know this tactic. I fell for this once, 2009, 2010, 2011. I'm not falling for this again. The forward, for example. Okay, so let's say it does get through and it gets to the inbox. Well, the email was forwarded. Well, what's the forwarded email? The forwarded email is something silly like you say, like, hey, Mateo, any interest here? And then below is the forwarded email, and the forwarded email says, like, hey, Mateo, yeah, I'd love the chance to speak with Benny over at Senders. What they're working on is right up my alley, or something like that. So it's made to look like someone sent Matteo an email and then Matteo forwarded the email to me. Like, that's all like, Zenefits probably invented that technique. The guys who invented it are still around. I'm sure they're, well, if they ever heard this, they'd be laughing.
Yeah.
But like, there's so few like actually new ways, because the humanity now needs to be front and center. Whenever I get cold emails from people and I look and the name seems a little bit too cute and it's a fake name, it's like, okay, why did they waste the effort to email me if they're a legitimate business from a fake name? What's hiding here?
Mhm.
And if you look at the clients, like we have 75, 80, 85 clients, none of them are sending from fake names. They're all people with earnest businesses that are trying to run a business. So it's like, why is the fakery coming in? And the more human these emails are, and the less sort of fake automated they are, even though they're all automated, the more human they are in sort of exposing the person's humanity, whether it's a value proposition or what, oftentimes the better they perform.
Right.
So it's sort of like the harder that people try, the worse they're going to perform, or the worse they're going to perform even after someone expresses interest. Like, sure, send them more info. Then the middle of the funnel gets heavy, and they can't follow through with actually being a human to connect with them, because they've over optimized the front of the top of the funnel. Does that make sense?
It does.
I'm
Yeah.
rambling a little bit, but
No, but it does make sense, because it's curious, because if you were a legitimate business, you wouldn't jump through these hoops, and people can somewhat smell that. I'm curious though, if you feel like different industries, different size businesses, the objective of certain email campaigns, have you seen that a certain length for those email sequences or email campaigns has a direct relation to whether it looks spammy or not?
well, so no. Keep in mind that if you're in an industry with lots of competition, in other words, if there are more than one ways to solve the problem and more than one provider who can solve the problem, that's a compounding factor. So I'll give you an example. If you're in the business of operational efficiency, not only are there software tools that can improve operational efficiency in their own way, but there are multiple providers who can also improve operational efficiency, and you could hire for operational efficiency. So by sending a very short email that says like, "Hey Mateo, is your business operating efficiency on your mind? I'd love the chance to connect." That's sort of like saying, "Hey Mateo, hungry?
Yeah.
Is food on your mind? Do you want food?" But you're one restaurant. It's like, well, there's 100 restaurants I could choose from. There's 20 different styles of food. I have ingredients in my fridge. I can just put something together, right away. I can order takeout. I can go out to eat. I can do so. Emails tend to get longer when you're trying to be more specific about exactly what you do in the realm of business efficiency. So that might be the first line. I'm not saying it's a great first line, but it could be, is business efficiency on your mind? I'm Mateo Carrasco. I do these specific things in these way. What's different about me is this, or whatever the value proposition that you're putting in this email. It very well may be that because you have lots of competition, you need to be pretty specific in the email and sort of try to build interest and intrigue. And in your case, you might say like 95% of businesses I work with have already tried to work with someone that was supposed to do this and it didn't go well. Maybe that's your first line of objection. So then you put in the email. Even if you tried to do this with someone in the past, I think you'll find my process to be very orderly and refreshing. And we move faster to get to business results than other folks because of these reasons. Could be pretty efficient. So if you have lots of competition and lots of similar routes to the same solution, a longer email, or at least more detailed email, might be justified. If
Right.
you're a totally novel solution, totally novel, meaning new. If you're a totally new solution, then your email must be longer because you're explaining something they've never thought of. For
Right.
example, if you're emailing clearly smaller Shopify shops, I'm making this up, this is totally made up, and you do chargeback protection, And chargeback protection, let's say chargeback protection, when someone buys something and then they want to give their money back, or they want to get their money back because they feel like they didn't, get what they were expecting. Let's say the chargeback protection is usually only available for businesses that do $1 million a year or more, and you figured out a solution about to do it for even businesses that make $1,000 a month. The chances that the person who received that email even knows what chargeback protection is, or whatever it would be, is very, very low. So it's novel to them. It's really new to them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to explain it. And you have to explain why you're the right solution for this. Because you have to do a little bit of Google defense. Because if they Google Mateo Carrasco business, optimization, they're going to find the stuff you want them to find. But if they type in business optimization specialist, because you're the email that sent them and you said that's what you do, I'm not sure if that's the wording you use, and to send them to Google, well, they're going, well, there's lots of providers. I guess I don't really need to talk to this Mateo character now, do I? Because you didn't do enough in the email to really get them interested. Now, in terms of reply emails, those can be short if their reply is using the same subject line because you're trying to bump it back to the top of their inbox.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
no,
I'm trying to say that there is no real specific optimal length for these things. We've seen quite lengthy emails perform extremely well and really have just single-digit interested reply rates that have totally changed people's businesses for the better. And we've seen relatively short emails do really well. We've also seen people completely change the value proposition of their main business in a way that resonates. For example, you might say, I do these long podcasts. I interview people like Benny, which is awesome. We do 40 minutes, we do 50 minutes, we do an hour, you go really, really deep. But let's say you want to start a shorts podcast and it's going to be 10-minute interviews. You might say, look, I can do 3 or 4 of those a day. So you might cold email your prospects and say, hey, I'm Mateo. I focus on these things. I'm launching a shorts. Do you want to be a short podcast guest? And you might be using that for lead gen. Well, now the value prop of your business is like some sort of rather complex business efficiency play. But the value proposition of the email is, do you want to hop on with me, do a 10-minute short, sweet interview? And then you might say, and afterwards, if you could hang on for another 15, 20, I'd love to learn a little bit more about what you're working on and see how we might work together. I think you get a lot of interested replies, and you wouldn't get people Googling business operations efficiency expertise because it's you pitching something that's relatively unique. They're not going to Google ways to get on short podcasts that aren't Mateo's podcast. Like, that would be weird.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that you have to focus entirely on your value proposition and have emails that are focused on that. You could change your value proposition if you want to experiment if that resonates better with your audience. The downside to that, of course, is it fattens the middle of your funnel.
Yeah.
Because now you have a whole bunch of people that you've connected with that maybe they're like, yeah, I'd love to see a proposal. Now you have a lot of proposals this year. Now you have to chase down those people. So there's sort of a trade-off between getting people that are high intent from the top of the funnel and then fattening the middle of the funnel to people that express interest. You still have to process them through, which takes some effort.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Benny, that actually ties into one of the questions I posted on my Instagram. I was telling them about you, and I had some questions from my audience.
Let's do them. How many questions?
I have 2 main ones.
Okay, 2. That's not too many. If there was 100, I was like, let's do rapid fire. We can do it.
But yeah. So one of them is from Robert, and he asks, "What are the main email issues you run into? I'm not getting any opens. So why do people not want to receive
any opens?
Or like he's exaggerating?
Right? No, it's okay. If you're not getting any opens, there's 2 things that could be wrong that you should be aware of. One is you could have an actual error in your DNS records. SPF, DMARC, DKIM, the actual technical setup of your email could be wrong. It could be imperiled, could have a problem. So that's one thing that you should investigate. An actual error in the foundations of what's going on. The second thing is you might have an error in the connection between the email system you're sending from and the place that's collecting the data. Because even really poor performing emails, even emails that are going to spam folders, you would see 3 to 6% open rates. Because a certain number of emails, even crazy weird ones, are going to go to people, and a certain percentage of people check the emails in their spam folder because they know that important things sometimes go there. So they might open an email that looks legitimate that's in their spam folder, and they might even recover to their inbox, and that might fire the pixel that lets you know it's open. So it sounds to me, if you're really in a situation where you're seeing 0% open rates, something is probably technically wrong, and you need to start from scratch and disconnecting things, reconnecting things, getting your MX records, all the things that sit in the back of your domain to make sure your email functions properly in proper shape. If you find that your open rates are really low, on the soft side, your subject line could be something off. You could have things that are just obvious spam trigger words. And I think currently on Senders, if you go to senders.co/test or something, senders.co, we have like a deliverability checker. If you send an email there, it'll let you know if you have a serious error with your SPF DMARC DKIM. We run a free tool for that purpose.
Nice.
So you can check it out there. But you probably have some sort of error. If you're finding that open rates are really, really low, on the soft side, you can look at subject lines and just ask yourself, is this a really weird subject line, or is it very, very long, or is it very easy to skip, or is it screaming like this is me trying to sell you something? There's potential there. Mm-hmm. The second side of this is you could be putting something in the email that is very triggering for spam folders, like $signs in a row or whatever. So you need to probably take a look at that. We currently don't have a spam checker on our website, but we have, but there are people that run spam keyword checkers that can be very useful. They're not 100% accurate, but they're going to give you a sense if they think that what you're offering might be sending you to spam faster than you would otherwise.
Yeah, I had to tone down my excitement. I remember a few years ago, I just love exclamation points, right? In all caps.
Yeah, excitement and things like click here can create problems.
Yeah.
And again, it's because Google and the systems that receive these emails are sensitive to manipulation.
Right.
If you have a heavy sense of urgency, anything that you can imagine, if someone's trying to defraud you, they send you those notices that are like, your UPS package is being held in package jail. Click here immediately to unlock your like that kind of thing. They're creating urgency. So Google and the various email servers are very aware of when you're trying to manipulate someone into acting urgently. So a kind of cool, calm, collected demeanor in emails can perform much better than emails that don't. You can create urgency in other ways, just not like emergency situation type urgency.
Gotcha. I got a question from Michael, and he says, I have been collecting emails in exchange for my lead magnets for just under a year now. Do you have any strategies when it comes to running a newsletter?
I'm not a newsletter dude. But that said, a newsletter business is different from a B2B business. So fundamentally, you have a relatively fat middle of the funnel now with all these email addresses. And it's within your right to decide how you're going to start doing email marketing to these people. The numbers for email marketing vary, a single percentage maybe from all the sends you're doing. If that email list is not that large, it very well may make sense for you to not put them into an email newsletter, or in parallel, actually just send them an email from you. There's nothing wrong with having an email that's plain text that just says like, hi, Mateo, you subscribe to or you downloaded XYZ from me X number of days ago or weeks ago, or not even mention the time. This is my product offering now. Would you like to learn more about it? Or, you don't have to run a very complex funnel to push someone to some next sort of phase if you're trying to build a higher dollar business. In my business, we do very little automation. We run a monthly newsletter. It's about email deliverability and things like that. But we don't really market the newsletter. We have a lot of people that come to us because they respect our expertise and want information from us. That's cool. Some people use our spam or deliverability checker. That's cool. But the sales folks on my team and myself, if we see someone interesting come through, we reach out to them because as a human, it's easier to sell to them.
Right.
The conversion rate to meeting are going to be much higher. And if you're actually a curious person and you're interested in what they're working on and you think you can help them in some way, that curiosity will come through and they'll be more likely to engage with you back.
Right. Yeah, it's so easy to overlook that you don't have to overcomplicate it. If you can just get the value prop in there and just make it simple but detailed, yeah, that's really all you need, right?
Yeah, I think that a lot of we're talking really about funnels, we're talking about cost per lead, and we're talking about all these things that people are really aware of now more than ever. On a very, very basic level, very complex funnels are best when you have a lot of lead flow. That's when real orchestration comes into play, right?
Mm.
When you figured out how to get Facebook ads or whatever to get lots of leads to come in, and those leads are getting emails from you and you're converting them, and it's a funnel where it's like step 1, you get X number of conversions, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and then whatever. Most people, and people like me who build multi-million-dollar businesses, not as a brag, just as a fact, I did not do it through any funnel mechanics at all. The funnel exists, but not through any automated funnel mechanics.
Right.
Because lead volume wise, we're talking the most leads we ever get on a consistent basis is maybe like the highest lead volume month I've ever had in my whole career is probably like 100 leads in a month. And it was like craziness, right? Because each lead is higher intent. We only like leads that are actually have potential to become a client. We want to meet with every lead, so we're not disqualifying them before the call unless they did something to obvious disqualify themselves, which happens. Oh, I looked at your website and I realized that you're out of my price range or something like that. So you don't need very complex funnel mechanics. You need a very basic CRM system, 3, 4 buckets, 5 buckets. Okay, someone expressed interest. Me personally, I look at their website, or I look at what they say in their communication with me or their path to me that I can have access to, and I make a decision. Yeah, this person could be an interesting client for us. We will send them an email. Whether you automate the email out is a separate question, because in systems like Pipedrive or HubSpot or whatever, you could just say, oh, I'd like to send them this email. So it can be templatized. I'm not saying you have to handwrite everything, whatever. But a certain percentage of the people that you reach out to that you think are a good fit are going to reply back because they expressed interest, and you're helping them further get what they want because they got into your world. So what I'm trying to say is, if you have a product that actually makes sense, you can do a lot of personal outreach to the people that come into your funnel. Now, if you want to put them in a newsletter, great. But most B2B companies see the newsletter as a sort of fail state. Really, I mean, that sounds a little bit aggressive, but it is sort of a fail state. It says, someone came into my world. We had a sales call with them. They did not eventually become a client, but we don't really know what to do with them until the next time that we reach out to them on a personal level to ask if their situation's changed. So we'll put them into our newsletter. So at least they sort of stay aware of us and they're aware of the value that we provide clients.
That's such an interesting perspective. Right? Yeah.
And maybe that's because I've always been in the like $1,000 per month plus zone where it's worth spending time with every client. I'm not doing $5 a month, $10 a month, $20 a month things. Maybe in that zone. But again, to me, it's not even the price, it's the lead volume. Because you might be a listener, you might have a $20 per month product, but you might not have 100 clients. So maybe you really do need to get on the phone and pitch people and try to get them into a $20 a month program using hand-to-hand combat. Yeah. Maybe that's what you have to do in order to get your first 100 clients. I mean, I can tell you with a straight face, Matteo, and at some point I ran a back of napkin calculation, but I think it took me over 1,000 hours of sales calls and sales email work to get past $1 million in annual recurring revenue for my business. 1,000 hours.
Yeah, it's not easy.
No, it's not that it's not easy, because it is easy in some ways. It just takes a lot of time. Right? So the reason I'm saying that is that, yes, I was charging $3,000 a month at that time for most clients in that sort of 3 to 4K per month range. You could run the numbers. Maybe I'm a little bit off, 20% off either way, and the number of hours, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit. You can take it however you want. But the sort of thrust of the story is the butt in seat, take a lot of time method of building a business is pretty much tried and true. And the wave your hands a lot, get a ton of attention, cram a bunch of people into a funnel, then run complex operations to try to get people to do something from that funnel using email and text or whatever to get to the next stage of the funnel, and then run it. At a certain point, you might actually be better off just doing hand-to-hand combat if you have the time and you really want to build the business. Because even if, I mean, I don't know what your business, you personally, but people's business goals are. But if your goal is to have escape velocity from your current job, and you are running a product or service or community or whatever that you think really is only $20 a month in value, which is fine, you really need to get to 1,000 members, I'd say, with churn and everything incorporated, maybe 500 members, $10,000 a month. But I think 1,000 members would be a really great thing to aim for. Well, at normal funnel metrics, you need a lot of Instagram followers. Holy heck. You need a lot of email subscribers to be able to convert enough people at normal email conversion rates to get to 1,000. You're just going to need a lot of them. But if you don't even have 100, then maybe that first 100, you should just roll up your sleeves and say, yeah, I'm going to go door to door and sell these things, basically. I mean, it's not door to door, but
Right.
you know,
yeah.
I'm going to work really hard. And I've been in those situations where I've gotten on a call with someone for a sales call, not me trying to sell them trying to sell me. And after hearing like a pretty interesting pitch, I'm like, wow, that sounds great. I think I could probably work. What's the pricing? And they say $20 a month. And I go, what are you talking about? That's basically free.
Yeah.
That's wild. Really? And then you learn, well, you're one of my first 100 customers. So I'm doing this hand to hand to get my first 100 customers, 50 customers, 200 customers. I'm trying to build the flywheel. And so, yeah, like here, I'm pitching you. And even giant companies, on my hunch is companies like Airtable and whatever, all these companies that have $1 billion a year in revenue probably started that way. And you said, well, how much does it cost? Well, it's free. Okay. Well, there's a plan that's $20 a month. And you're like, okay, wow. You're the founder? Like, wow, you invested a lot of time in this. And it's like, well, yeah. So I think there's just value in that kind of slow and steady wins the race. So my advice for this person would be, if you have a lot of email subscribers, go really deep on the best ways to monetize your email subscribers, the best way to activate them. If it's not that many email subscribers and you have a product that you're ready and willing to sell, maybe tear through the list 10 at a time, try to find out everything you can about them, send them a personal note. If it's somewhere in the middle and 10 a day, then try a plain text email with a very, very simple call to action, like, would you be interested in chatting with me about what I'm working on? You can be humble in the email. You don't have to make big promises in the email, because all you want is them to say, sure, I'd be open to that. Yeah. And you connect with them to chat. And then you can see if they're interested in what you're working on and build your business.
Absolutely. Yeah, you brought me back to all the calls I've done, really low hanging fruit, friends and family, just saying, hey, I just need testimonials. I'm reading a book right now called Fanatical Prospecting. It's the same kind of concept. You can't beat what'd you say? Butt in the chair type moments, just putting in the hours.
Well, fanatical prospecting, I think I've read that book. There's a lot of prospecting books, and if you recommend fanatical prospecting, I'm sure that it's good for other folks to read. There are a lot of books, business books out there. A lot of them repeat the same thing. I believe that fanatical prospecting is interesting because it talks about how the 30 days of work you're putting in this 30-day cycle directly relates to the next 30 days.
Yep.
And one of the things that, I mean, this is going to sound so dumb. Like, people are listening, if they've gotten this far, they're going to be like, this guy is just full of like totally basic things to say.
No.
My golden rule for business building is 3 a day. You need to do 3 sales calls a day. And it's very easy to look at your calendar a week forward and say, what days do I have 3 sales calls scheduled? Which ways don't I? And if you need to go home early tomorrow for whatever reason, you can't do it and you only do 2, then that just means you need to make it up at some time. I've never seen a business of my friends or my own that did not grow or learn how to pivot, because that's the other thing you learn when you do lots of sales calls. People just tell you, I'm not really interested in this, but I am interested in this other thing you said. Maybe you could do that, right? Like,
Yeah.
For example, someone like you might be pitching hard on like some sort of transformation. And they might be like, look, I really just need an audit. And you're like, okay, I have an audit product now. So you sell audits and you learn that's the path to go. But at 3 meetings a day with people who are in your potential target market at any product price point, those compound, they get to know you, you learn a ton. And it's super easy just to look at your calendar a week in advance, say, how many days next week do I have 3 on the calendar? And I know now at this exact moment, I don't have 3 on my calendar. I have a salesperson. They have 3 on the calendar, my head of revenue. But it's super easy to just see. Why? If you think about it, you don't even need to do any complicated math. You just say 3 a day. There's 20 business days. That's 60 a month. That's a lot of leads, but it's a good amount. If any percentage of those close, you're adding new clients month on month. They'll come in clumps. You'll get 3 or 4 new clients in a month. You'll get 10 in a month. You get 2 in a month. You get 1 in a month. But always accrue over time. And then the truth is, as fanatical prospecting outlines, if you take 2 weeks off, well, then you have a 2-week hole, and you'll probably feel it in your closing rates moving forward. And I believe this, even if you're not a salesperson, if you really are bad at sales, like there are some people that are really, really bad at it, like they put their foot in their mouth, they say stupid things accidentally, whatever, and you need support. So you hire a salesperson, you should be on the call with them. Let them do the talking, that's fine, but be there. It really matters, especially in the early stages of the business.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, people care more about competence than salesmanship anyway.
Oh, wait, that's really interesting. Could you expand on that?
I think that, well, I mean, now it seems almost obvious. I'm not even sure if this is revolutionary or like interesting in any way for your listeners, but in the past and in some industries, like being a buddy, like being a bro, being like, oh yeah, for sure, yeah, okay, oh yeah, oh dude, wow, I love your blue shirt, that's so cool, like was sort of seen as salesmanship. But 9 times out of 10, people would rather the nerd that's super competent.
Yeah.
So I think the magical formula is someone who really understands as the competence plus process. That's the important key. Meaning, if you're not great at sales naturally, for example, it doesn't come naturally for you to follow up right after a call and chase them down, and you kind of feel a little bit uncomfortable in everything like that, which some people are. You could read books about it, you can understand it, build a process around it. It's much easier to say, I'm leaving it to the process than having a struggle with yourself every time you need to do the next step that the guy in the book said you should do, and you agree in your head that is the right thing to do. That's a weird mental state to be in. So competence plus process. If you're really competent, and you're charismatic, then maybe you don't have to have a very complicated process. Like for me, naturally, I don't have to think a lot about follow-ups and chasing people down. We organize things in a CRM and such, but that's not a big heavy lift for me because I know a lot about email deliverability, and that's what folks want to talk to me about. And I trust myself to send the follow-up email right after and to have a process in place that sort of does it. I don't need a very heavy-handed process. Other folks might need a very heavy-handed process because they might not be able to trust themselves to run that sort of process. But I think people are much more attracted to competence in a sales scenario.
No, I love that framework. That's a good one. Benny,
I gotta keep working on it because
yeah,
it wasn't as smooth as it could be.
I liked it. I liked it. So I know we're coming up near on the hour mark. Time flies, but this has been great. I like to ask a somewhat like lighthearted question, but
Sure.
I think it's really interesting the answers I get. But if you could get dinner with anyone, dead or alive, fictional or non-fictional, who would it be and what would you ask them?
Oh, did you send me this in advance? Because I don't think I saw it.
I did. It was one of the bullets, but
I would probably just have dinner with my dad. My dad passed away a number of years ago. I wouldn't ask him anything in particular. I loved my dad a lot. I learned a ton from my dad, both, directly and by observing him. I think probably I would just have dinner with my dad. And if that doesn't count because it's a parent or something, I'd probably choose someone like my dad's dad, my grandpa Jack, who died when I was like a little kid. I think that there's something about the world's a little bit weird now, but so much great information is in books.
Mhm.
Like by reading books, basically.
Yeah.
So you can virtually almost have dinner with like Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Edison, because there's how many really great biographies of these people, and you could really understand things about them. But it's the real personal ones.
Right.
Right. Now, dead or alive, I'd say the most advanced answer I could give would be like, I'd love to have dinner with like myself when I was 24 or something. Like that would be really interesting.
Yeah. No, that's such a good answer. You're so right. You're basically downloading that person's brain, but the people, like you said, personal relationships. Yeah.
You ever see on social media, people say that thing of like, if you could meet your 21-year-old self, like, and you can say 3 words, what would the 3 words be?
Yeah.
What are the 3 words that you'd give yourself if you could meet your, let's say, 19-year-old self?
Oh my gosh.
3 words. There'll only be 3. Putting you on the spot.
So 19, I was in college. I would say look outside. I would say look beyond school.
Okay, interesting.
Because I was very much in
philosophical.
There's a really strong what I call funnel, like a current river system here in DC. Everyone goes to the same 4 universities. Everyone goes to the same 4 like firms, like consulting firms. And I did all that. And it was very competitive in high school and everything, but it's the same things over and over. It's been 30 years of this funnel to DC. And so I was a good student and everything, and I did what I was supposed to do. But there's a language now that people are tossing around, which is escaping the matrix, right? You hear that all the time.
Yeah.
I was perfectly happy in the matrix, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'll be sincere. I don't really have the entrepreneurial. I wish I could take ownership of that, but a lot of listeners don't know that I was actually engaged to a girl, and she was very entrepreneurial. She has her own business now, but we were engaged. We broke up. Like we had the wedding date planned and everything, called it all off. But she was the one who actually showed me what's possible outside. And I kind of reluctantly left my job and did all this stuff. And then I started this business after we broke up. But I would not even realize what my MRR actually was as a consultant and how much they were actually paying me. Like that broke my mind when she told me, look how much your skill set is actually worth in the market.
Yeah.
And
they're billing you out at $200 an hour and they're paying you 65 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It blew my mind. So I would say at 19, I was with this girl for just over a year. And I was just like head down doing schoolwork, just following like the path laid out. I would say look beyond school because there's so much out there.
I've given this a lot of thought, And I'll tell you what I would tell my 19-year-old self: buy 1,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah. You know what? I changed my answer completely.
Because I like the 1,000. People always like, buy Bitcoin, but I'm like, no.
No.
I'm 19. You have to be very specific. You have to be
Yeah.
like, buy 1,000 Bitcoin. But you know, it didn't even exist then. So
2016, I was in college, and my roommate Jack kicks down the door into the living room. He's like, "Bitcoin just broke $1,000. Bitcoin just broke $1,000," and we're like, "Get out of here! That's not going anywhere."
yeah. But my story is way more specific than yours. I remember when Bitcoin was invented.
Wow.
Someone posted on Facebook about it, and I was like, that's weird. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. 100 feet from my office was one of the first crypto exchanges called Mt. Gox.
Okay.
A person who's very close to me shot the official company portraits of Mt. Gox. Mt. Gox failed, lost all the money, Bitcoin. People, protesters outside every day. My friend James was super, like, everything about it was screaming, stay away from this. Like, stay away, stay away. And had I just been a little bit more curious, but that's everyone's story with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay,
Man.
let's wrap it up, man. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. This was fun.
Of course, Benny. How can the listeners get in contact with you if they want your services?
Benny at senders.co. Senders.co is the homepage for Senders. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I post some stuff. These days I haven't been posting as much, but my past posts are all about email deliverability and kind of in depth, and I take pretty strong stances on stuff. Good. So check it out if you want. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn if you want, and send me a note if you'd like. Benny at senders.co, Benny.
Awesome. Tremendous, Benny. Thank you so much for your time.
Hey, thank you.